LD3, the Old World Patreon.
Hello everybody and welcome to a new video of LD3. Today together we want to check magic in the Old World 1.5. Note this is before the January 2006 update. We'll see what happens then. But in 1.5 magic has seen a lot of changes. We want to check what these changes mean for magic, for wizards. How can you still use magic? How can you still dominate with magic? How do you defend against magic? And which armies benefit from magic the most? To achieve this, I want to check first the changes, then some math, then we see how do you build magic into your army list, what are the core principles of how to build magic. Then we check the tier list of magic users, which armies use the most magic, and in the end I'll give you a few examples for very magic heavy lists. But first let's have a look at the changes. Level 1s and level 2s only get +1 to cast, so the level 2s lose a +1 to cast. Level 3s and level 4s are hit way harder. They only get a +2 to cast, which means that the level 4 wizard actually loses +2 to cast. We parallel see only slight changes in spell complexity at the same time. This means magic is a tad harder to cast. On the other hand, a +1 to cast became stronger relatively and absolutely, and magic resistance became a lot stronger as well. Magic resistance 2 already negates a level 4 or a level 3 casting bonus. We see a few more changes to spells, which impact some spells more than others. Vortexes only hit during the movement. You cannot let a vortex flip through 15 units anymore. As soon as he has finished his movement, he is placed next to the unit to the battlefield. At the same time, vortexes deal damage when walking through. I think the biggest change to vortexes is that you cannot remote control the Pillar of Fire anymore. It's random now as well. This is a huge blow to battle magic, because Pillar of Fire was such a good tactic against lone characters, against banshees, against ethereal, against all these types of units which you might have trouble with because it was so well controllable. So this is gone. That's a quite blow to battle magic. And Earthen Ramparts now grants fully low linear obstacle rules. This is very big. I mean, there are some tournaments which play this differently, it seems. But still, Games Workshop confirmed that Earthen Ramparts basically is a low linear obstacle, which turns off storm attacks, which turns off impact hits, which turns off multiple attacks. This is a big thing for that spell. It's also reduced by 1, so it's castable now on a 9. Impetus is on leadership now. This means you can modify leadership to lure units in. Chaos Dragons have that as well. So this is also a change to the leadership-based spells which you could have. That's pretty big. And yeah, core scoring and positioning are more important, which means that controlling the chess game becomes more and more important. So vortexes still have their place in the game. Fireballs are important. Yeah, but we will see what else and how this is important for magic. Let's have a look at the lores. You can see battle magic has 2 spells reduced in complexity. I think the Curse and Hammerhand most likely. And Pillar of Fire, you already heard it, was nerfed. So the lore with the most spells reduced in complexity is War Magic, which is quite nice because War Magic wasn't the best lore overall. But we also see Necromancy being the biggest the biggest reduction, which seems a bit odd because Necromancy already was such a strong lore. Illusion also has 2 spells reduced, overall 0.3 effect, and Lore of the Wild and Troll Magic have that. Demonology as well, so we already can see which spells are the winners of this FHQ. Dark Magic and Elementalism as well, and High Magic don't see that big reductions. Yeah, for Elementalism we saw the low linear obstacle buff for Earthen Ramparts, but at the same time TMP was nerfed. Travel Mystical Pathway is now 12 within, volley within. So yeah, it's still pretty strong lore, which provides solutions for situations which you can't solve otherwise, which makes it still a top lore and is also the reason why this nerf was needed most likely. Dark magic falls a bit off, in my opinion, battle magic too, because of the nerf. So illusion, necromancy, and for other reasons demonology are for me the key winners. We see a game way more centered around infantry right now, especially with the 1.5 changes. The scoring game, all of that. And demonology is such a great booster for that. You can move your infantry bricks with flying, the summoning is a great spell, reducing leadership is great, and demonic vessel allows us to break any stalemate situation. Because with the new rules, we often have these stalemate situations where infantry is facing each other and they can't charge, or they can. Maybe this will be changed in the FHQ now, in January. And Demonic Vessel just gives you the edge. With Demonic Vessel, a gore brick can go like a hot knife through butter, through a graveguard, for example. And with the right spells, every unit can. So this is a really big impact on the current infantry or Death Star meta. Yeah, so in conclusion, again, demonology, elementalism, illusion, and necromancy are the lores I would focus on right now, but I will show you later builds which are still viable with battle magic. When we check the spell types, we see the following. Vortexes saw the slightest reduce, which makes absolutely sense now. Vortexes are now dispelled to the vortex and not to the wizard anymore, so you can hang back with your wizard, cast the vortex, and then your opponent can now still dispel the vortex instead of having to be within of his dispel range to your wizard. So it makes sense that they only see a slight reduce in complexity, and some of the best vortexes, like the Column of Crystal, are still cast on a 10 up. This means they're pretty hard to cast, so if we want to cast vortexes, we have to build our wizards accordingly. Assailments see the biggest reduction in complexity, and they work against other units, so this is a case where magic resistance works, so they really have to be easier to cast, and right now they're in a good spot, I think. Magic missiles next to vortexes saw the other slightest reduction, and Games Workshop makes it clear here they don't want to have a game which is entirely decided by magic missiles. We still have this type of game because at the same time Games Workshop decided to give +2 to cast to Wild Herd, of course, but we'll see how this changes also with the FHQ. Conveyance, hacks, and enchantment spells see overall an average a slight reduction effect. 0.3 is the average a spell is reduced. I'd say 1.5 or 2 already. We lost 1 to 2 to cast. Is what we lose from that. One complexity is around 11 to 15%. So you can estimate magic got 25% worse to cast if you do not invest more resources. Investing more resources than before means you can still cast magic somewhat reliable, but since it's more expensive, you really have to think if it's worth it. Let's have a look at the complexity versus casting bonus table. In the most left column, we see the complexity of the spell, and in the first row, we see the casting bonus to it. So for example, a glittering rope is cast on a 8 up, and if we take a level 1 wizard, we get a +1 to cast. So only in 58% of the attempts we will get the glittering rope. This is without any dispel attempt. If we push that to a +2, for example by Mortis Engine or by any other special rule, we already have 72%. This is +50% casting probability, which is insane, really insane. So +1 only is the best only for nice to have. For example, the Ruby Ring. Ruby Ring will go off every second turn, and only if you can have it outside of your opponent's dispel range. And still then you have to fight against the fated roll. I would never build a strategy or some units around the +1 to cast, not even for glittering rope or for similar spells. If you have a +2 to cast, for a 7-up or an 8-up it seems okay, and even for a 9-up it's only nice to have. I see a lot of vampire lists right now which run a dark magic level 1 or level 2 with a lore familiar for the battle lust to be able to break stalemates with the grave guards themselves, and this is more a theoretical thing, so it applies a layer of potential pressure of mind games to all that, because there is a big risk that if the spell goes off, the unit will devastate its opponent, but in reality it will only go off in 58% of the time. And even then you still have dispels, or maybe you can do some -1, so they need at least a power scroll. With the power scroll it's roughly +2 to cast, and then we are again in the 83% range, so then it's reliable. If you want to cast consistently spells with a complexity of 9 or even higher, do this only with a +3 or with a +4. Not having +3 or not having +4 locks you out of the big spells. It is just not reliable. And if you want to use magic, in all of your turns, sure, it's fun to do the big rolls, to do the crazy spikes, or to do the spectral doppelganger with the withering hat guy with a great weapon. These are wonderful anecdotes, but for competitive play, or if you want to have this effect over multiple games, don't do that. Build for reliability so you can enjoy the spikes on the table. When we talk about this and about the spell levels, we have to take magic resistance in mind. At the start of 1.5, when the magic changes came out, everyone said, oh my god, I will use magic resistance 2 on all my units and I will basically be immune to magic. Then, when people found out, oh, magic is only on some armies strong, they didn't take it at all, and surprise, the magic armies were super strong. Right now, magic resistance, I think, trickles back into the game, and it's a big game changer for hexes and magic missiles. Enchantment and conveyance, of course, allow us to ignore magic resistance because they go on our own units. This means if you plan to use big spells, you have to check if it is for your own units or for opponent units. Especially against opponent units, like if you want to cast a magic missile with a 9-up, which does interact with magic resistance, I would only do this with a +4 to cast. On the other hand, if you take conveyance spells or enchantments and you want to have spells that go off on a 9, I think you're fine with a +2 or maybe with a +3. So yeah, that's still doable. This also shows how important magic resistance is for ourselves if you want to defend ourselves from magic, which will be also a point we discuss later. But let's not solely focus on magic resistance. There is still a thing called dispelling in the old world. And yeah, dispelling of course is now a bit better or a bit easier for lower level mages, because the disparity to the higher mages is on paper not that high. I mean, what I said now multiple times about magic and how to make magic reliable, castable is of course true for the reality. Rarely mages will cast on their spellcasting modifier. So if you just go out with a level 1, you will still have a rough time. But still, I mean, even as a level 1, you can dispel some spells. What you can see here now is a table about casting spells against a dispel mage in your range. And it can be read as on the first column, you see the dice result needed to cast a spell, and in the first row you see the advantage you have in your casting bonus. So if we cast with a level 3 under a Hearthstone, we get a +3 to cast. We want to cast Wildtide, so we are on a 5, we need a 5, and our opponent dispels with a level 3 as well, which means, thanks to the Hearthstone, we have a +1 in the first row. This means we are at 62.93% for that Wildtide to go off. And the example I give in the text here is the Earthen Ramparts, which is similar. I mean, if we have a +3 to cast and we dispel against a +2, it's the same column, it's the 1 column, but we need a 6 to get it off, so it's 58.3%, which is not really reliable. Yeah? So even against a bare naked wizard, if that wizard has a +1 to dispel, it's down to 50%, and if we get a +4 to cast, we also need 1 less, so we can cast it on a 5, and we have a +2, which means we are on a 70% cast, which becomes somewhat reliable, and in this area we can start to plan. Because as you can see, as long as you don't have like the easiest of spells going off on a 3 up with +4 to cast against only a fated Dispel, you rarely will be above 80%. And I think this is healthy and interesting, because it means you really want to have some wizard just to dispel, just to be able to use the wizardly dispel, which means that mobility in wizards becomes, or has an even bigger role. And turning off Dispel is also very big. How big the effect of magic resistance is can be very well seen in this table. Magic resistance does not only push us down, so we need higher results, but also to the left, because our +4 to cast suddenly becomes a +2 to cast. A simple fireball, which goes off on an 8 up, so we need a 6 to cast with a level 4, which would mean we usually should get it against a fated Dispel in 63% of the time. Suddenly, with magic resistance, goes down to 32% against a level 4 or level 3 Dispeller. Magic resistance is key if you want to survive magic missiles, if magic missiles are a particular weakness of your unit. And yeah, mods to spellcasting are the key if you want to use magic offensively. If you want to use magic with hexes and with magic missiles, built to have +4 to cast. It doesn't make sense to use it if you only have a +3 to cast, or only +2 even. So all the comps out there which limit magic to +1 to cast after spell level basically limit magic missiles a lot if people just bring magic resistance. Or otherwise, if magic bonus is comped to +1, then make sure you bring magic resistance, because it will eliminate magic missiles basically from the game. But yeah, we think here in all terms and all comps, so I guess it's still doable for most of the comps or most of the metas out there right now, so you can still use that, which is also, one has to say, for a lot of armies really needed to be able to at least cast hexes. Another way to sum it up is that we have to avoid Dispel at all. So we need mobility on our mages, and this is a bit new. In 1.3 quite often we didn't have this, and yeah, level 1 and level 2 mages can still deliver key spells, but they have to stay at the back or on the flanks and all that. So reserve move was already very big for Dispel casters, which could cast outside of the Dispel range and then move back in, and this has even increased. It's always better to dodge your opponent's magic resistance, so use conveyance and enchantment spells, especially in the current meta, be it Death Star meta, or if we also look at Shock Cavalry with the Totem of Doom, Wrath, or something, you know, the reroll stuff, all that. Yeah, conveyance and enchantment spells can have a pretty big impact on the game. They can be quite often be casted outside of the Dispel range, as said prior, and they dodge magic resistance. Rerolls will do lots of work against magic resistance or for enchantments and conveyance under Dispel, and we saw already a new item dropping which allows us to use a reroll on casting. In addition, most of the factions which can or want to rely on magic do have some rerolls built in, or can buy cheap rerolls by items. The best option, as always, is just to take a +4 to cast, maybe additionally a reroll, which is very interesting. So if you go for a control wizard, Beastmen come to mind, and maybe also the Tube King Illusion Caster. if you don't need the lore familiar, which is of course a heavy trade-off, you could go for the reroll and the +4 to cast, and this is massive. This is just massive. With the reroll, for example, the Earthen Rampart going with a +2 to cast against the +2 to Dispel goes from 44.8 to 63% of being cast, which is okayish. Yeah, it's not super good, it's not perfect, but just this item allows you to cast your spells more than half cases. Or yeah, it's +20%, it's almost a +50% buff of casting this key spell in the right situation. So this situational thing, I said this today a lot, you quite often have to time your magic right. So you have the right buffs on casting magic, a power scroll, a reroll, all that in the moment it really matters to bring the big spells on, to use the right spells in the right situation. So you have a resource game going on with Magic now, and I love that. I just love that. This is really exciting, and it still allows you to play around Magic if you build your army list right. Okay, we talked now a lot about which types of spells you still can use or which became better, and how you cast correctly, how to build your wizards, or what you need for Magic. So when you plan your army list and when you plan your game, you need a plan for Magic. And I just noted down 5 bullet points which you should ask yourself before creating your army list. What do you really need for Magic? The most simple answer is defense. Then you can have mobility. Maybe you need another -1 to hit. Maybe you need some offensive spells to bridge a ranged gap, like in Beastmen. Yeah, so there are various things you could need. And yeah, check your army list and check your plan you have with your army list, or do it the other way around. Check your magic, which you have access to, and yeah, develop a plan with that magic. The next question is then, if you're set on using Magic, how can you get the spells reliable? Well, the obvious answer is a lore familiar, right? But you can do also more stuff like redundancy or other items using just the signature spells, so there are quite a few options. The next question is then, how can you cast it reliable? We talked about this in length. You need the rerolls, you need all the modifiers, all that. Check your army list, check what your faction offers you, and try to build with that. The next one being, how can you avoid it being shut down? Mobility, 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 or use units that you sacrifice or with which you pressure the opponent wizard out of your casting range so he cannot dispel. Harpies come to mind, multiple units of fast cavalry, stuff like that. And what do you need to support the caster? Orcs, for example, need a unit of orcs to give a +1 to the caster. Maybe you need some units which you can fall back in good order through, so you get to safety. You need a herdstone, all that. Yeah, add everything you need to your army list. But before we check a build order for wizards, let's get back to defending against magic. If you only want to defend against magic, we already saw that even a level 1 can have a big impact on your Dispel game. Plus Dispel shifts to the right. This is good versus close casts, which happens quite often versus +4 casters, which can cast with very low numbers. So you take all the Dispel to move your opponent yeah, to the lower percentages of bringing them through. For example, if he casts a spell on a 3-up or on a 4-up Glittering Robe with a level 4 caster against your Fated, it's 85% roughly, and if it's only with a +2, it's 73%. Still pretty good to Dispel against, but if you add then a +1 to Dispel item, he's down to 65% from 85%, which can be very crucial against a spell like Glittering Robe or like Earthen Ramparts, where it makes a really big difference on the situation in the game, if you win the game, if you win a crucial combat or not. Magic resistance shifts down in a vacuum, has a very big effect, makes casts closer, and also to the left if it affects your own unit. Magic resistance is better than investing into levels or investing into plus dispel items, but it can be also quite expensive if you want to protect multiple units. Of course, in a Death Star world, the Death Star has to bring magic resistance 2. Magic resistance 3 quite often locks you out from other options and is so expensive that I would not recommend it. In best case, you have a wizard, be it level 1 or better level 3 up, more because of the range than because of the +1, with the +1 dispel item and magic resistance 2. This is a super good synergy and is often enough even against magic heavy lists. Graveguard bring right now quite often 1 obsidian lodestone and sometimes the skull staff, and the skull staff gets sacrificed very often. And I don't think that's a good idea if you bring Hex Wraith. If you bring the Hex Wraith, I would always try to bring the skull staff to be able to defend better against magic. Even in magic heavy lists like the Trolls list where I play right now, they're very vulnerable to fireballs or to magic attacks per se. I really want to have the Idol of Morg, but right now I just don't find the points for it and it hurts me so much. Maybe I have to sacrifice on one wizard the ability to reroll the casting for the reroll of dispelling, because magic can still have a very, very big impact. Okay, then let's finally shift over to the wizard build order, or how to build magic. There again we have 5 bullet points, 5 tasks we have to fulfill. The first thing is clear: our wizards must survive. If they're dead, they cannot cast. The second point, wizards must cast. This means we need all the stuff we talked about in length in this video. Third point, know the right spells. So you see this is a direct translation from the bullet points I made prior, but here with switched priorities. It depends on your list, it depends on your idea of magic and what you want to achieve with it. If it's more important that the wizards cast their spells or that they know the right spells. If you use just a few wizards for chaff damage, then it's more important to know the right spells, and it's not that important that they really cast it, especially if you spam small wizards. But if you go for the big spells, then it's more important that they cast it than which spells they know, as long as they know the big spells. Yeah, so it's interweaved. And this is the next point. Your list must be able to profit from magic if you want to use magic, and your list must be able to support magic. How do we achieve that our wizards do survive? The obvious answer is put your wizards in units. It's not always doable if you play some strange unit types, if you play Mortuary Cult and you want to have mostly Ushabti, or if your wizards have to be mobile, if you do not want to use your wizards only in the front arc. And this is a thing in units. So if your illusion caster, for example, doesn't necessarily wants to do that. If you want to use Slan offensively with a Spectral Doppelganger, he has to be ethereal, then he can't join a unit when playing with Renegades. So there are a lot of considerations which will deny that strategy, but it's still pretty solid for most of the wizards. For Undead, for Vampires, it's also not doable, because then you cannot heal, except if you're Italian and you drill into the rear, but let's not dig down into that. Yeah, so if you have units for the back where your wizards can hide in, or if you have light cavalry with reserve move where a wizard can go in, these are good units to plan and to take. And for my Beastmen, for example, I most often take 13 to 15 Angors with Musician and a Champion to make sure my wizard has some kind of safe haven, or I just use the Gorbrick for that. And the next thing is protective items or mobility. This is difficult. If you are not inside of a unit, you should take either mobility or a protective item, but the protective item also depends on your ability to protect the wizard from being charged or shot at. if you have a lot of chaff, if you have a lot of good units to hide behind, if your wizard is very mobile, you still do not need protective items. I quite often see on a GBS the Chaos Blade armor to use then his Brave Staff as a great weapon and still have a 4-up, 5-up. And I think if you find yourself in a situation where your Hack Tree wizard needs to resort to the Chaos Blade, you did an awful lot of things wrong. So this is a bad investment. I'd rather take 5 Harpies for that or 10 Angors for that, to be able to protect him, to be able to play more on the table instead of him being in combat and relying on an surely somewhat cheap but still on a protective item. The other option is mobility. Using the flying carpet is a big thing here. Using some mounts is possible. Fly mounts are of course very great. We quite often see Empire wizards on Pegasus, which punch way over the weight. And when you do this and you're very highly mobile, you usually can choose where to go, where to move, and you can quite often move outside of threat range of stuff. If you're not that confident, or if you have a lot of shooting against you, then a protective item and mobility can be used. But I would only use this in fringe cases, or if you, for example, bring a caster on a monster, right? Like the Chaos Dwarfs do, when they bring the Sorcerer on a Bull, or the Taurus, stuff like that. Or if your caster is a combat mage, of course, which is a special thing. But, like Shogengan, yeah? But for Shogengan you don't need protective items or mobility, he has both baked in. But you get what I'm saying, yeah? So for the classic caster in his paper-thin robes, I would really go more towards the wizards in units or the mobility route if it is possible, and only rely on protective items as a last resort. Combinations are good, we heard it, but they are very expensive. Things that grant you protection are Reserve Move, TMP, Steed of Shadows, Infernal Gateway, Shimmering Dragon. These spells allow wizards to evade, to survive into position, and against such spells, this is another thing when it comes to magic and defending against magic, an auto-dispel item can be crucial to win the game. If you lock a wizard in position and you're able to charge him, it can be quite often BGG. So consider that if you want to push with armies against magic, so I'm talking about defending against magic here, make sure to bring an Dispel item. And even a single power scroll can help you more here than a Talisman of Protection could do. If you get out with your power scroll from the one crucial situation in the game with one of these conveyance spells, it was absolutely worth the effort. Yeah, leadership 9 to 10 is very good for rallying, especially with a musician. If you have leadership 8 or 9, that's sufficient then. Safety nets are super important, like small units, which you can place behind your wizard so he and his unit can flee through. This is of course not possible for undead, and because of this, most often the undead choose the mobility route with the horse or the cloak of dust or anything like that, or they have to use reserve move bubbles, and they quite often rely on the reserve move. So if you can dispel the reserve move, then you can actually do stuff. Vampires are well known for the use of protective items in forms of a Mortis engine and either the Crown or Talisman of Protection. Ja, then some German text here. Für Magier mit Schadensaufgabe muss 360 Grad Sicht eingeplant werden. This means for wizards which should do damage, and for wizards with a damage task, you need a 360 vision. So using them within a unit is possible if the unit has reserve move or open order, stuff like that, so you can position quite well. At the same time, whenever you turn a unit, you are in high danger of getting charged into the rear, right? So you have to be careful with that. Best case is being skirmisher here. And yeah, battle mages, also combat mages, have to be equipped for their role, or the unit has to be built like that. So drilling the wizards back and then adding them to the second rank in combat when it's infantry which gets charged. So you can use Steel Spectral Doppelganger. Stuff like that is gamey. I don't like that. but you can tool around and play around with that if you want to make illusion mages more efficient. Yeah. Another option, of course, is for the Beastmen, for example, if you have a Great Bray Shaman, to play him as a Demology Wizard or as a Primal Fury Wizard in the Wild Herd and give him the Case Blade and the Black Maul. So he suddenly does a lot of damage, but he will still be way worse than a Beast Lord, but he can also cast and support the unit. So that's maybe a consideration. Second point, wizards must cast. All the wizards need bony to cast. Bread and butter spells, so like if you have a Demonology caster without Law Familiar, big one, or whatever you do when you just have your spells rolled and you want just to support your units, you'll need a +3 or +4 to bring all the spells off. Rerolls are better than a power scroll because they are usually once per turn. For situational spells, a power scroll is still good and may be recommended if you want to escape, or if this is plan of your escape plan, then take in every case a power scroll. Same is true if you need a spell in one certain turn to turn a matchup, like the Battle Lust on the Graveguard against the Goreprick and stuff like that. Multiple layers of magic generate multiple tries to get the spells off. Redundancy is key, both for rolling the spells, of course, but also for casting. If you have multiple wizards which can do the same spell, you have a way higher chance, it's another reroll, to get the spell off. Without any bony accessible, like if you just have the flat wizard spells, and if you don't go exclusively for conveyance and enchantments, I would only use magic for dispelling. Redundancy brings us to the next point, the right spells. Of course, we can take the Law Familiar, the Cheaters tool, to get the right spells, and I highly recommend to bring Law Familiar in almost every list which wants to have the correct spells. Yeah? So I will rarely use a magic heavy list without the Law Familiar, and if I do that, then because the wizards have like 5 or 6 spells, because I have 3 or 4 level 1s, level 2s for the signature spells and all that. Use bound spells. If you have bound spells available which can provide situational or general support like Scourge of the Burdened, take them. Scourge of the Burdened, for example, to me is the most influential item right now in the Beastmen, even if a lot of people don't seem to recognize that, because it gives your wizard everything. It gives him survivability. You can go into clutch situations you can't go else. It's another attempt at a reserve move for what you don't have to bring a primal wizard or a Law Familiar, so you can roll on these lores, get another wild tide in, all that. It's wonderful, really wonderful. For the vampires, I rarely see the banner, the reserve move banner, and for both undead armies, I would always take that reserve move banner. It's not a spell, it's not only a bound spell, it's an auto-resolve spell, which takes pressure off from your wizards and allows your unit to be more flexible. Wonderful item. Yeah, other things, Fireball Ring on a long-range caster, stuff like that. There are a lot of good bound spells which can relieve pressure off your wizards. And this is the way you achieve the redundancy. Multiple casters with high levels and bound spells give you a ton of spells which are still pretty cheap. I had some discussions about this, about the role of magic in the Old World and how the Old World escalates pretty well when it comes to list building in comparison to earlier editions, especially community editions like Warhammer CE. I never played the 9th Age, sadly. And yeah, one of the biggest points for the Old World is how cheap the spells are. 30 points for a spell is a thing that is quite often unmatched in other games, especially if you can cast every spell you have. If you want signature spells, not only Wild Tide, also Glittering Robe, Hammerhand, whatever comes to mind, Doombolt, Dark Blast, bring a lot of level 1s, the summoning, sorry, bring a lot of level 1s for the signature spells. Don't even buy the level 2 then. I will show you later why you could buy the level 2. It's also a redundancy thing if you still aim for the signature, Gaze of Gorks and Oaken Shield, for example. Yeah, but if you're tight on budget, just bring the level 1s. It's quite often good enough, and the second level is quite often a thing you will rarely use at all. But depending on the lore, for example elementalism, it can make a huge difference. I love a level 2 with a Jack Dagger for elementalism, giving another shot at TMP, giving another shot at Earthen Ramparts, and also providing another wild tide. Things like this can work pretty well. If you have 3 level 2 Demonology wizards, you can take, for example, 3 times the summoning, and hopefully one inside of a unit gets the Steed of Shadows or the Demonic Vessel or both, so you can play around that a bit. Multiple level 2s will bring their own quality through quantity, both for the reliability of your spells to be cast and for the for getting the spells. As I said prior, level 2 with a lore familiar for Demonology is right now the one thing I run in almost every list. Okay, last but not least, or point 4 on the list must benefit from it. We need mass as a multiplicator for enchantment spells like Demonic Vessel. We need, for example, the right toughness to use Demonic Vigor to push it on the correct point where it has a big impact. Black of Rust can be used very well by ranged units, Demonic Vessel mostly by melee. I mean, it gives -1 AP for the ranged weapons, but it's not knightable. Necromancy, only use that if you have leadership effects like Scream or Casket, or if you have a lot of terror units. Terror bombing is still a thing, especially with Necromancy, and it can hamper the ability of low leadership armies to play into you by like a lot. A single Griffin in an Empire army, which is Necromancy backed, can have a big effect on certain armies. Stormidable, for example, used this in Empire, and I think it was not a bad idea. It's very interesting to use Necromancy for that. You need the correct troop types as a target. Steed of Shadows is only applicable to infantry, not to a cavalry unit. For cavalry units, I'd rather take quite often battle magic, because the Curse of Cowardly Flight can be used very well in cavalry units to get rid of redirecting units to get to the original charge target. Correct troop size is important and correlates to mass as a multiplicator. Also have your troop size in mind when you use TMP and stuff like that. Do not use non-synergy units if you want to go the magic heavy route, so units which cannot benefit from your magic at all. This doesn't make sense. These are not available as targets, which makes your magic more situational. I love to have a list in which every element of the list can benefit from your magic, so in the end it doesn't matter what your opponent does, you will always find a good opportunity to bring a spell off with high impact. Pick synergy over good stuff in magic heavy lists. And point number 5, sneaky typo above, the list must support it. You need the carrier units, as I said before, which can protect or can grant mobility to your wizard with reserve move, open order or skirmish. A special dirty trick is to use very long or very wide units and to enter these units with your wizard. Then you can choose the position in the fighting rank freely, giving you a long teleport range with your wizard into his final position to cast for this turn when it comes to magic missiles, or into Dispel range, which can also be quite interesting. If your opponent plans his turn and he wants to make sure he gets a spell off and he places down his wizard very defensively, and you can join such a unit, or if you can reform such a carrier unit and then enter this unit and you get suddenly teleported back into Dispel range, this can have a very big effect on the curse of the game. Yeah, safety nets. I love my safety nets. Cheap units which you can place behind your units that can flee. Vampires will cry now. So you flee through them. In the best case, you trigger a panic check, they flee as well, and everything you have is outside of charge range of your opponent. Next turn you rally, use your conveyance spells to damage, and rinse and repeat. Units that provide plus cast are absolutely essential. No lizard magic list without Engine of the Gods. No orc magic list without orcs, basic orcs, or maybe the boar boys, which provide enough unit strength. And bring ability gap bridges. If you don't have an anchor, if you are very vulnerable to this, bring a steam tank or bring a case spawn. If you need fast troops, maybe bring ambushes to that, because your brick can't kill everything. You need to score, you need to get back in flanks. Maybe you need one unit of cavalry to have some counterpunch. Maybe even you need some cheap flying monster like a Jabberslithe or a Chimera to block off heavy cavalry, or to block off stuff that can annoy your wizard, you know? So these types of units are also very important, and I talked about synergy before, and sure, these units would still provide some synergy. A third infantry unit, while you have only one demonic vessel caster and your plan is to do damage with demonic vessel on units, isn't helping. But Chef is. Yeah, and then into your units you need bodyguards or challenge chums, so very cheap characters you can throw into challenges to save your wizard from being killed. Reserve move and big units have the big advantage that you can reform them quite often, and you can keep your wizard out of striking range. Remember that even with the new rules of the fighting ranks, characters can only have attacks directed against them if they are in base contact. Okay, how about a tier list? You guys love tier lists, so here have a tier list. This is my magic user tier list, which has blatant mistakes in it. I will explain them later and how they snuck in. It's not who has the strongest magic, but it shows which armies use magic the most often, or which armies are the most reliant on magic. I will walk you through from tier F or D, the lowest one, to tier S, the notorious frequent magic users, and I will talk a bit about the differences, how the armies are built, what the main challenges are, and yeah, what generally classifies these types of lists. Let's start with the two lowest tiers, C and F. C and F invest only in magic if they have to, like the Royal Host has to do. Basically, they need the wizards for a rise. It's not entirely true. There are also some Royal Host lists where you have multiple wizards going the illusion route, and of course, yeah, this is for a certain point in time, basically. Same is true for the Blood Herd, which I have looked now more specifically, and I think it is very desperate for multiple wizards, similar to the Orc list I will present later. But yeah, High Elves quite often play only the two princes in the Christian Warhost. Maybe this changes now over time as well with the Monster Hunter's Tapestry. I lost hard against Ogre Kingdoms in the last few weeks when they had illusion wizards in German comp, but this is very German comp specific, so usually they don't bring magic, or it's not worth to bring magic. Maybe if you bring the Crucicle or the Halfling Cookbook there, so it's for defending then. Yeah, Dwarves rarely bring magic. Wood Elves quite often have only the Lord Dragons, and Wolves of the Sea is also outdated because nowadays you quite often play the Demon Prince. So you can see this was made at the beginning of 1.5, and we see again the world meta or the world game shifting again more towards magic. While at the beginning a lot of people said magic is dead, or a lot of people tried to play without magic, and then they faced players who built their armies accordingly towards magic and accordingly in the direction of conveyance and enchantment spells, and suddenly you don't stand a chance anymore, especially when we look at the Death Star meta forming. Yeah, Noon, for example, takes it as a side effect. That can also be a thing where they bring the wizards in for the squint often magnifier, and for elves right now it was at that time quite often just a verse plan in comparison to the two lords and the full dragon list. Yeah, but nevertheless, with army lists who want to invest as less as possible into magic. You will just focus on your budget and on nice to have stuff and maybe an occasional Dispel mage. If you have the points, why not bring a level 1? That can be on a Warpfire Dragon, for example, when you go Chaos, not the Wolves of the Sea. I'd say it's misplaced here. It can be in the Empire State of Nuln. I would always bring at least one level 1 on a horse with the Doombolt and the Squintoffen. It's just better than a Fated. Maybe you can even bring a Wizard's Familiar if you have the points. Maybe you can bring a Ruby Ring on some fringe character, or use a Runesmith, a Rune Lord in the Dwarves when you have the points, which is just there for utility to provide the Armor Bane, and as a side effect can provide some Dispel and better magic resistance. Okay, now we come to the magic users B tier, who will often bring a level 3 up for protection and for enabling, but don't have enough magic bonus for all in. Here you lean into multiplying your strength, so you are already a strong army which can fight well or which can shoot well, and you want to improve that by magic. Illusion, Demonology, Battle Magic, Dark Magic are mostly used, and depending on your +2 cast bonus and your roll. The Dark Elves are only here because of the Focus Familiar and the shenanigans they can do with that, and I personally think that, for example, Cathai is right now in the current meta bringing a lot of wizards. Yeah? The Shogungian Lords are pretty strong, they evolved into that role. We see more and more comp towards balloons, so I think Cathai with a +1 to cast right now uses magic more and more, but still I would put it to the A tier now. It is not planning entirely on it. Bretonia, on the other hand, is one of the armies which sees less and less use of magic. Back in the time, you used the Prophetess quite often in the Grand Army because it was the one thing which you had over the Exiles list. Right now that we see more and more Erratic Crusade, Bretonia tries to focus on sheer force, same as the Warriors of Chaos do or the Heralds do, and do not bring wizards at all. But I have to say, in my current experience I have in the German Com team tournament, where I've piloted Chaos again, you are very, very vulnerable, even if you bring the Brazen Collar and no wizard. So at least bring a level 1, but I think I will tinker around again with a Sorcerer on a horse, so this is really the classic magic B tier here. Nomadic War or the Orcs and Goblins are similar, same as the High of Grand Army. I already said I would place most likely the Croatian Warhorse also here, where you quite often bring a wizard to protect your dragon, to enable your dragon. You can have Unbreakable on your dragon, which is a super solid game plan. You can lean into Drain Magic, or you play the Illusion route, so they're quite flexible with that, and they have a reroll, which is a fantastic buff. Yeah, the Chaos Dwarfs, honestly, I think the most competitive way to play them is bringing, with Renegade Pack, the Seneschal on Tauros instead of the wizards, but without renegades you're basically locked into bringing your wizards. You don't have any buffs to that, so yeah, you try to enable your army with your level 3 or level 4 or to improve its impact, but it's not like you can go fully into magic because you lack all the sweet stuff, the rerolls. Now you get it with the new items and the +2 cast. And Empire Grand Army is only here because it's the only thing it has over Nuln is that it can bring level 3 up wizards. So if you bring the Empire Grand Army, you should make use of a Wizard Lord or 2 or 3 or how many you're allowed to bring, 3 in Games Workshop comp. So this is the one thing that you have over Nuln. Use it. Yeah, and that's for the B tier. Now let's head to the A tier. What you can see pretty well in the A tier is that the use of magic kinda correlates with how strong the armies are right now. And I don't mean the Woodeyes Host of Talzin here. The Tomb King's Grand Army is still exceptional strong. They do have quite often a level 3 wizard. In my opinion, they belong to the B tier because of that. They have very strong spells in the lore, and magic is an essential part of the plan. The exiles of the Bretonians fit here too, in my opinion, because of their exclusivity of demonology for Petonia, which is an enormous force multiplier for their already strong units. Also, they can fly their strong infantry bricks around, so I feel like exiles should be played into magic, because it's the one thing next to cannons and the heirlooms, of course, they have over the normal Bretonians. Magic in this tier is needed to survive or to shine. It's still true for the Tomb King's Grand Army, which will always have, I think, Illusion Caster right now in the current meta, be it if you bring the Tomb Guard break for the healing, all that. So mobility buffs or magic missiles are taken. Beastmen Grand Army will also almost always have a big Hectory Shaman, maybe even two if you don't go the Doomball route. And the Host of Talzin, I'm not so sold here, but I feel that this is a bit like the German comp thing. When you play a big unit of infantry here, you often want to have magic as well, especially for a cheap level 2 casters. The Troll Horde for the Orcs and Goblins follow the same pattern, and I will show you later what I mean by this. Yeah, Chaos Demons, it's basically the same. They often spam magic missiles, but they don't have enough bonus to cast or the budget to go all in, so you often have the harpies, you have an evasion game plan, and yeah, some hard hitters there. And what you can see is that magic alone doesn't win you games or doesn't push you up in the meta right now, but you have to meet certain criteria and you have to use it right, and then everything comes together. Okay, let's go to the S tier of the magic users, where most often more than 50% of the characters' points are wizards. These armies stand out by their cast boni, and magic is the plan. So you want to dominate the game with magic, which means you need magic to tailor the odds in combat or in movement towards you, to overcome your opponent's plans or units, and to multiply your force in a way that it can stand up to the more straightforward factions like Chaos or Bretonia or Dragons. So your whole game plan revolves around magic. For the Beastmen and the Skaven, State of Shadows and TMP are key spells. You want to dominate the movement phase, you want to evade what you can't beat, and you want to make sure that you get into combat with what you can beat. So these two spells really stand out. You need these spells and you need to play around these spells. For combat, Earthen Ramparts or Demonic Vessel are needed, one defensively, one offensively. The other option is the Lizardman can do that in Renegades, the Illusion route, where you have Illusion on the slan and you use Arcane Vessel to bring out the illusion spells to the right point. Modrical does this as well. I think I have a video, I'm not sure if I have that on video, maybe on the German channel, where I get beaten by James Ramsey with Motricult, where I apply Chaos without magic defense, and you can really see how my army falls apart just because of his Illusion Wizard. So this is a very potent defense strategy. The vampire counts, of course, they stand out. They have the Mortis, they have the Necromancers, they do like everything with magic. The healing is not directly magic, but it's tied to the Necromancers, so yeah, basically it is magic. And the reserve move spell, the One Health, Macabre spell, and all the necromancy buff spells are really needed to bring the power of the vampire counts to the table. And I'd say if you take this away from the vampire counts, they're just an immobile army which cannot deal enough damage to actually deal with monsters or with Death Stars. Yeah, so they fully rely on magic. For these armies, it is super important to use all what I've said prior in this video, and yeah, hope that you don't get your plans thwarted by the snake eyes. And yeah, this is for me the peak magic in the old world right now, where you build all the things, the characters, the units, everything has to work together hand in hand to get the maximum out of your army. Let's close the videos with some examples and my thoughts behind these lists and why I take what. First example is my Beastmen army. The core principles are easy. I want to have a level 4 elementalism hack tree wizard when I play with a core brick. I have more levels on the level 4. This is good for elementalism because elementalism offers a very high value in the spells. There is only one spell which I don't like, the flaming sword, and this one I can exchange for Wildtide. This means hopefully I have 2 magic missiles on the hack tree caster. For redundancy, because I want to make sure I get TMP and Earthen Ramparts, I take a level 2 elementalism caster with a Jack Dagger, which also casts with a +4 in this army list. This means I essentially have 6 spells cast with +4 from elementalism, or 4 spells and 2 Wildtides, which is a pretty strong baseline to make the list going and to have all the tools at hand. Then I take a level 2 Demonology Lore Familiar caster, just for Steed of Shadows, but also to take Demonic Vessel in certain standoff matches. I do know that a lot of Beastmen players lately prefer the double Primal caster, or maybe they add Crawl Maw to this build here, what we can see here, and I think it's not as bad. I write here that Crawl Maw is random, so anti-synergy, and this is true, but through redundancy you can still get over this. Like, then you have to go all in and bring 2 level 4 primal casters, and Crawl Maw doesn't violate the Krent army composition because he's a named character, and there you play more the control route via the wooden need span, or how it's called, the big vortex. You have 2 to 3 attempts to reserve move, which is pretty good, and even offensively you can make use of the fighting in the extra rank. You will have some mediocre or bad spells, this happens from time to time, but by taking 2 primal wizards you can mitigate that a bit. However, in this case I would still either take a Demonology caster with the Steed of Shadows and Demonic Vessel if you want to take the prick, but the prick becomes significantly weaker than in the variant with the Beast Lord. So yeah, you have to weigh that, and the solution for the double primal is quite often that you ditch the prick and you play instead fully relying on evasion with many reserve moves, many wild tides and many mobility spells. This type of game becomes doable when you have less comp on wizards. I most often play that you can have only 3 combined shamans. If you can have 2 level 1 wizards instead of the Elementalism Jack Dagger guide, or just another wizard, like 3 small Brace Shamans, a Great Brace Shaman and Crawl Maw, this becomes way more available. But back to my list here. If we have these 3 casters and we want to protect our unit with elementalism, we want to nerf or to hex the opponent with Black of Frost and then deal a lot of range damage, we need Gores, Ungores and the reserve move spell by the Scourge of the Burdened to be mobile, to be flexible and to survive. To cast, we have all the tools already. We have Jack Dagger, which needs a unit. Okay, yeah, he will be either in Ungores or in Gores. We need a Hearthstone and maybe a Power Scroll here or there on the Demonology and on the Elementalism caster if you feel so. Redundancy means we want a second Steed of Shadows if possible, so you could add, instead of the Beast Lord here, another level 3 Demonology caster, or you go into the route of the multiple reserve moves I described earlier with the primal path. For the right spells, I already hit that checkbox. We have the Lore Familiar, we have the level 2 Elementalism for redundancy, and if the comp allows, we can put in another level 2 with Demonology. The list must profit both from Elementalism and Demonology. This is the reason why you need the Core Death Star in this list. The Core Death Star is the multiplier for the Demonology and the Elementalism spells, and monsters don't really fit that. If you don't want to use that, if you don't want to use Elementalism or Demonology, don't play the Core Death Star. Or, other way around, if you don't want to use the Core Death Star, then Elementalism and Demonology are not that much needed and Primal actually becomes better. The list must support it, so we need redirectors, angors, harpies, doggos, and a Shartag, which also work as a safety net, as a Hearthstone controlling unit, and you can turn off opponent dispelling by just charging them. So the whole list is centered about the magic. I tailored every single bit to benefit the ability of the Gore Star to kill everything it faces, and my magic to shine and get the spells off. And only because every single thing is tuned into the same direction, I think this list is so successful. Yeah, I show you an example here, the full magic kit, or the full all-in magic, even without the Beast Lord for this list, with less comp, where you can bring 3 Bray Shamans and 2 Great Bray Shamans. I think this is still doable with this type of list, even without the Beast Lord. Maybe kit out the level 3 Demonology for combat with the Black Maul, or indeed then some defense equipment, or you could bring more Wargors into that unit, because you still have around 100 points in characters left. You can take Shaman equipment, or as I said, more Wargors. You already have in the list Pelt of the Dark Young for magic resistance 2, Pelt of Midnight for -1 to shooting, which you could ditch maybe here for more points for another Wargor or something like that, or the Chalice. We don't have the Chalice in there, you could take that. Yeah, it's a lot of options you have there, a lot of stuff you could do. And of course, in this list, in this type of list, what is missing here are 2 things. First off, the Vitriolic banner, which I love right now on the Gore Brick. You have so many attacks, make them count. And of course, the Monster Hunter's Tapestry, if available, the new item, which makes you immune to stomp attacks, and which is absolutely mandatory for any Death Star, as long as it's possible and allowed. Let's see what the meta says. Let's see how big its impact is. Maybe we already see a change to that in January. But I hope that more the Death Star problematic is tackled instead of that single specific banner. I mean, if we look at this, we have 1000 point of characters, of which most likely around 800 will go into a 400 point unit, making it a 1200 to 1300 points Death Star. Yeah, add safety nets and tools, Razor Gores, Harpies, or a Shartag, maybe a single Tuskor Chariot, until you hit 2k points. Monsters and chariots, I just said chariot, but one is okay. Multiple chariots are a liability and will give away victory points. They will just get shot because your opponent will not shoot at a prick. You can hide your other chaff, or you can just ambush it so he doesn't have other targets. And this is another layer which makes this list so successful. Yeah, this list here sent us on Ovation with this loadout without any combat equipment on the Shamans, so you could reduce the Gores a bit, you could go into the Primal route. This is maybe the more direct approach to Magic then. You can, as I said, also go to the more aggression route, which fits better the Gore Death Star, and use a Beast Lord or take the Black Maul. Another example is the Mortuary Cult, which also goes all in on magic, and I just have a simple list here, which is not very fleshed out or very good, but just to show you the principles, we use them again. We do have a Necromancy level 4 wizard, and he takes the Curse Weaver wand to get another +1 to cast. So basically he can get 1 from the Mortuary Cult, 1 from the Casket of Souls, 2 because he's level 4, and +1 of the Curse Weaver wand, making him a +5 cast for the Spirit Leech. This will punch through most of the magic resistance available. A fly item or a horse is an option. Right now we only have archers here and skirmishers as protective units, so maybe you want to have variation, and maybe you want to have illusion caster over the elementalism one, or have elementalism instead of the necromancy guy, so you can toy around here a little bit. We add in 2 level 2 wizards because this is all about magic here and we don't want to make any compromises. One is an elementalism caster for redundancy in spells with the Amulet of Serpent. Yeah, it provides a bit of a buff for the skeleton archers. Most likely they are not big enough here, but it also is a multiplier for your Ishapti attacks. Another level 2 is necromancy to make sure we get his spells. Not sure if he is needed. You could most likely cut him, and he carries a ruby ring. Yeah, in core we do have the rage damage, which synergizes very well with the elementalism. And in rare and special we do have a package which makes use of the necromancy. We have 2 Casket of Souls. I would personally say I'd rather take a Skull Catapult over the 4th level 2 with the Skull of Foes, and we have Necrosphinx, which can trigger terror checks. Of course, multiple Necrosphinxes are most likely stronger, yeah. But you only have that many points for special and rare, so you have to make some decisions. In 1.5 this is less reliable than it was before. You can only have it for 1 spell per turn, so you have to make it count and you have to take care when you use that. A second unit of Shabdi right now is often better, especially in teams tournaments, than the World Leadership pack, and in that case you'd rather take Illusion Wizards. Okay, and then we come to the last example of lists I've prepared here. The Troll Horde. Yeah, trolls are a very weird kind of army. This list is not really optimized. I just want again to show you the reasons why I pick which spells or why I pick which unit here. The core of every Troll Horde is of course Ogdrus Swamp Digger. He enables the reroll on stupidity checks with the troll magic and gives a +2 movement buff around him for stupid units. And this means our trolls are quite fast and are quite reliable as long as they are within range of the general or Ogdrus. We add a Goblin Odd Knob level 3 here with the Lore Familiar and Elementalism. So we have the TMP for mobility, we have the Black of Rust because we want to do a lot of shooting, even if it doesn't look like it. Wind Blast maybe, depends on your opponent, if you want to take the Black of Rust or the Wind Blast. I have to say I would cut him and the Goblin Mob lately, and I would lean more into Orc Warboss for combat, but this is again a thing which you can switch around, which you can play around. I would also play the River Trolls bigger, like this is the non-German comp variant, where they are actually quite expensive, so take all that with a grain of salt. This list is especially good because of the German comp rules, but it is an approach how you can play that list in not so competitive playing, relying heavily on magic. The Orc Weird Knob on level 3 has the Staff of Badoom, which enables him to cast very reliable Ruby Ring of Ruin and Battle Magic, same as the other 2 Orc Weird Boys, so we take a lot of redundancy here. We have 7 Battle Magic spells, with which we hope to roll Oaken Shield for the Orc Mob. We put them all into the Orc Mob, so we get a +1 to cast. We have the reroll items on the level 2 wizards. We have another enabling item on the level 3 wizard, which means we hopefully get a lot of bony to cast and we get our spells off. The main damage from these guys is actually the Gates of Gorg. It's a signature spell, so we are fine here without the Lore Familiar. What is missing in this list is basically the Wizarding Hat on one of the big boss, or it doesn't make sense on a weird boy, because we want to have the orcs stupid, so they benefit also from the +2 movement spell. The Orc Boys then should run Poison Banner with shields and warbows, maybe Warbanner, but I don't think so. Some Goblins as protection for the Odd Knob, a Wolf Rider Mob, which is also Chaff and can help to protect our wizards, or which can serve as a safety net. 2x4 River Trolls with great weapons to deal some damage into units, and 9 Orc Boy Mobs for counter-striking. The idea of this list is to use the trolls as blockers, so they adhere to our plan, and then to use a maximum barrage of magic missiles, Gaze of Gorg, Wind Blast, Ruby Ring of Ruin, some shooting from the Orc Mob to deal with the opponent's threats, and to be able to control the center or one flank of the board with our combined arms approach. It's not that strong, but I think it's quite unique. And if you can make the River Trolls a bit bigger, especially for 2500 points, it becomes way more fun. And that's it. That's my video about Magic in 1.5. Of course, there's a lot more to talk about, especially in the vampires, in Cathai, in the implications of these two into the meta and how you should build for them or against them. I could fill 2 hours only about that, I guess. But I think the core principles of Magic are treated here and are shown here, And if you take this by heart and if you try to apply this, then I think you can use magic very well in the Old World 1.5. If you have any specific build ideas, if you want to know specific details, or if you have questions about magic, about the factions we checked today, let me know. I'll try to answer everything both here on YouTube, and for more detailed build help or similar stuff, feel free to hop on the Patreon Discord and we can discuss there. There are also a lot of high-profile tournament players which can help you with list buildings or core concepts. Hope you liked the content. Until the next time then, see you. Counted by LD3.
LD3. The Old World Patreon.